Hi, welcome to this Starting Out webinar. Today's subject is sustaining activity, keeping things going in the classroom, which I guess is of interest to all of us. My name is Chris Cole. I work in a fairly large comprehensive and I've been teaching maths for probably longer than I actually care to admit. I'd like you to think back, whether you've been teaching 6 months, 6 years, 16 years. Think back to your last few months of teaching, your last few sessions. Think about a session where the students didn't really do well, where their learning wasn't on task, where the activity wasn't basically sustained. Then think about other sessions where they were really on task. The learning objective was really met, it was really going forward well. From those, I'd like you to think about the items and the aspects that really kept them on task. The activities that were really successful, that kept them engaged in learning. When you've got that clearly in your mind, try and keep it there, please, for the rest of this workshop, the rest of this webinar, because that will provide us a background for you to think about as we go forward. Perhaps you want at this point to just pause the presentation for a minute or so while you think about the items that you're going to have as your background, your successes for the background of this workshop. Our learners come to our sessions in a variety of states. They really do. They may be coming in from a long night out or a very short morning or a long break. They can be coming in from lunch with all the postprandial factors. They could be coming from physics, humanities or English. They may just not be ready for maths. On the other hand, at the other end of that spectrum, they may be coming in with attention ready. They really want to do this lesson and they're wired and ready to go. And if we bore them for more than 10 minutes, they will let us know that. So we have this range of learners coming in to us. And the first thing they come into is our classroom, our teaching area. Whenever we take one of these over, all of us go in, I'm sure, and reset it to what we want to be our classroom. But over a period, things slip, and it happens to all of us. We need to check perhaps once more about layout, about displays, about how the furniture looks, about whether the equipment is in the right place at the right time. Is the whole thing looking right? A good thing to do here is to use a critical friend. Find a colleague, a teacher in your school, who will join your students as they enter your work area. They can look, they can sense, they can feel the same as the students and feed back to you on what can be improved in that area, effectively what slipped. It's a good place to start. And finally, of course, we all need new buildings and brand new equipment. Only look at changing what we can change. Only look at the things that will make an impact. And so our learners are seated, they're ready to go, and what happens now? The first activity. The starter. It may be a classic starter, but can I please make a plea and perhaps a little note of warning that the quality of our tasks, be it starter, plenary, main activity, must never be just a substandard curtain raiser. The student must sense as they come into our classroom and as they sit and start that quality is good, it is relevant, it is valid, that they will learn, that they are going to make accessible, measurable progress by coming to this lesson. And that impact is important from square one of the activities. So the starter, important. Can I suggest also you make sure that the timing is quite tight, that a starter does not allow too much time, so that before they've finished, the next task is on them and the activity level is kept high. And so we go on to the tasks themselves. Open tasks are good. Open tasks are important. We need to look first of all at the way in which our groups operate. Group work is always a good way to maintain activity. In the 1950s, a consultant told us that a group size of 5 was probably optimum. For education, I'd suggest this is maximum. A pair can be good. A pair can spark off each other. A 3 can be good as long as one person is not excluded. 4 is good as long as it doesn't break into 2 pairs, and probably 5 is our maximum. Perhaps even look at 3 and 2 as a subset. Group work almost automatically leads into competition. Competition is great. When they see the fruit and cereal bar, which is today's prize on the activity, you'd think it was made of pure gold the way our learners compete for it. Competition will happen amongst the pair. They will compete with each other, and certainly among the groups. And the reason this helps us is it maintains the activity and attention level. If a competing group is making good progress, your group wants to catch them up, wants to do better, and ideally beat them. So competition can be great. And all this within an open task. Open and closed tasks will vary. There are some things you may wish to close down, but mostly an open task work. But if you have to be very careful that you do not lose track of the learning objective. Looking at the tasks and activities themselves, there is always the chance of activities to be open or closed. And obviously we want an open type of task, an open type of activity. It's good. It allows the learner to expand, to think more deeply, to go into things more deeply. But can there just be a word of warning about the learning objective? Don't allow the openness of the activity to lead us off the main learning objective. For example, looking at probability, I'm sure we all use a national lottery, 40 million to 1 odds of winning, or perhaps a Premier League. What are the odds of Chelsea winning this year? I have no idea, 5 to 1 or 10 to 1. But it is so easy for that lesson, going successfully, to drift off the learning objective. And perhaps to talk about Aunt Nellie, who actually won the lottery, or Great Uncle Tom, who nearly played for Arsenal. Keep the learning objective clearly in mind as we go through the task. The tasks themselves have to be kept open, but keep targeted. Depth by all means, maybe not too much breadth. Probably about now we need to start thinking about assessment. How do we know that they know? There are lots of options here, but the key thing is that assessment does not provide a drop in the attention level, that it actually keeps the activity going. I want to look very briefly at 3 things. Think about spoken mathematics. We know about being lectured, 30% on board take, learning with making notes on a lecture, maybe at 50. Groups can get us up as high as 66, maybe even 75, 3/4, but the really high learning happens with peer teaching. If we are speaking our mathematics to a colleague, to a small group, or even to the whole class, that is where the learning is really cemented. So spoken mathematics, excellent. Written can be good, but it must not be allowed to slip into pen-poised, learner on their own, activity level and attention level, slipping away as they write a few lines. Keep it interactive. Perhaps they annotate each other's notes. Perhaps they make notes for their colleague. The interaction itself will keep the written mathematics assessment on task and keep the activity level high. Presentation is great if the learner is happy with presentation. If the learner is concentrating more on presentation itself because perhaps they're nervous about that method of communication, then it's probably best not to use it for them. For those that do enjoy presentation to a small group or a big class, it can be good. And last but not least, looking at pace. Pace in a lesson is a vital ingredient to maintain our sustained activity. If we make the lesson go too fast, the students will drop off the train. They simply will not be able to keep up that speed. Equally, if we make it too slow, they will doze off gently in a corner and the assumption they can catch up later. Pace needs to be varied. It needs to be kept going at higher and lower rates to keep the learner's attention on task. And so to a few resources. There is a Teachers TV session which shows beautifully 2 teachers working with open and closed questions. All too often we say that open questions are per se better. This shows some advantages of closed questioning. a good one to look at and to see which method you use and which you would prefer. Two others that may be helpful. Enrich Maths is a good site to use for investigations and questions of that kind. There is also a site called Education Interactive. Education Interactive has some games, but it also sparks our own thinking about games, how we can use Scrabble and Boggle to teach mathematics. Okay, a summary. 4 key factors to take away from this webinar. Our classroom. How does it work? How does it go? The task itself. Are the tasks correctly structured? Are they going to maintain our activity level? Are they going to keep our learners going? Assessment. How do we know they know? We cannot leave it out, but it must not be allowed to drop the pace of the session. And lastly, pace. If the pace is wrong, we'll lose them. Incorporate those 4 things and we should all find our activity sustaining high with the learner's attention up. Thank you for watching this webinar. Hope it's been some use to you, and please use the website to make some comments thereon.